The least skilled people are often the most confident, and they have no idea anything is wrong. That is not an insult. It is a measurable pattern, and by the end of this you will see it in yourself. It is called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it works like a blind spot in your own mind. When you know almost nothing about a subject, you cannot tell how little you know, so you feel strangely sure. For the next few minutes I am going to show you the real experiment behind it, the famous curve that came from it, and exactly where that curve quietly lies to you. Because here is the twist. The most popular version of this idea, the one you have probably seen, is partly wrong. Stay with me, because the honest version is far more useful than the meme. It started in 1999 with two psychologists at Cornell, David Dunning and Justin-Kruger. The spark was almost a joke. A man had robbed 2 banks in broad daylight, with no mask, his face on every camera. He was stunned to be caught because he believed that rubbing lemon juice on his skin would make him invisible to cameras. He was not drunk, and he was not insane. He was simply too incompetent to know that he was incompetent. Dunning and Kruger wondered if a milder version of this happened to all of us. So they brought students into a lab and tested them on 3 things: humor, grammar, and logical reasoning. Then they asked each person a simple question: how well do you think you did compared to everyone else? Here is what they found, and it is the heart of the whole effect. The people who scored the worst were also the most wildly overconfident. Those in the bottom group, scoring around the 12th percentile, guessed that they were near the 62nd. Think about that gap. The lowest performers believed they were above average. They were not lying, and they were not just bragging to look good. When the researchers showed them other people's answers, the worst performers still could not tell that those answers were better than their own. The very thing that made them bad at the task also made them blind to being bad at it. So why does this happen? The answer is the most important idea in this whole video. It is something called metacognition, which simply means thinking about your own thinking. To know that an answer is wrong, you usually need the exact same knowledge that would have made it right. A person with no ear for music cannot hear that they are singing off key. Someone with weak grammar cannot spot their own grammatical mistakes, because spotting them needs the grammar they are missing. Dunning called this a double burden. You fail at the task, and the same gap robs you of the ability to notice. Skill and the judgment of that skill come from the same place. Lose one, and you quietly lose the other. Now watch what happens as you start to learn, because this is where the famous curve is born. At the very beginning, with zero knowledge, you are at least cautious. You know that you do not know. But the moment you learn a few facts, a couple of videos, your confidence rockets upward. You now know just enough to feel like an expert, and nowhere near enough to see everything you are still missing. People sometimes call this the peak of Mount Stupid, and we have all stood on it. It is the new investor who is sure the market is easy. The driver who thinks everyone else is the problem. A little knowledge does not feel like a little. It feels like the whole picture. Now stop for a second, because so far this has been the comfortable part of the story. It is easy to laugh at the overconfident beginner, especially when you imagine it is somebody else. But the curve does not end at that peak. What comes next is a steep and painful drop, and there is something else I promised you. The neat little curve you have seen shared 1,000 times online is not actually the data from the original study. The real shape is stranger, and the way most people draw it is closer to a myth. We will get to that honestly in a moment. But first, the fall. As you keep learning, something humbling happens. Your confidence collapses. The more you genuinely understand a subject, the more you discover how vast it really is. Every answer opens 3 new questions. The map of what you do not know keeps growing. This is often called the Valley of Despair, and it is the part beginners never expect. It feels like getting worse, but you are not getting worse. You are finally seeing the size of the mountain. This is the moment many people quit a new skill, right when they have started to actually understand it. If you have ever learned more and suddenly felt dumber, that was not failure. That was progress. If you push through that valley, you reach the most underrated part of the whole journey. Slowly, with real practice and real feedback, your confidence climbs back up. But this time it is different. This time the confidence is earned and it matches reality. You now know what you know, and just as importantly, you know what you do not. This is what genuine expertise actually feels like. not loud certainty, but calm, accurate judgment. The expert is often the one saying it depends, while the beginner is the one shouting that it is obvious. The goal was never to feel confident. It was to make your confidence true. But the effect has a second face, and almost nobody talks about it. The same study found that the top performers actually underestimated themselves. If a task feels easy to you, your brain assumes it must be easy for everyone, so you discount your own skill. This is part of why real experts so often feel like frauds, the quiet weight we now call imposter syndrome. So the curve cuts both ways. The least skilled overestimate, and the most skilled underestimate. The loud voice in the room is frequently the least informed, while the person who actually knows is the one full of doubt. Confidence and competence are not the same thing, and sometimes they point in opposite directions. And this is not just a lab curiosity. It shapes the real world every single day. Ask a room of drivers if they are above average, and around 90% will say yes, which is mathematically impossible. It shows up in bad hires who interview with total certainty, and in investors who are sure they cannot lose. It is in the patient who trusts a confident wrong answer over a careful, hedged, correct one. We are wired to find confidence reassuring, so the person least aware of their limits often sounds the most convincing. That is the real danger of this effect. It does not just fool the beginner, it fools everyone listening to them. The most certain person in the room has not earned your trust. They have only earned a second look. Now let me keep the promise I made at the start, because honesty is the entire point. That smooth curve, with the tall peak of Mount Stupid and the deep valley, the one all over the internet, is not from the original paper. Dunning-Kruger never drew it. Their real data was closer to a simple line, not a dramatic roller coaster. And there is a deeper criticism. Some statisticians argue that part of the effect is a measurement illusion. When researchers in 2020 re-examined it, they showed that random noise and a known bias where almost everyone rates themselves above average can fake a similar pattern. The real effect is probably smaller and gentler than the meme makes it look. So hold this loosely. The core insight, that beginners struggle to judge their own skill, holds up. The cartoon curve does not. So how do you actually use this without becoming paralyzed by self-doubt? You do not need to feel stupid. You just need 3 honest habits. First, assume you are somewhere on the curve right now, especially when you feel the most certain. Strong confidence is a cue to slow down, not speed up. Second, replace opinion with measurement. Do not ask whether you feel skilled. Get a score, a test, a real piece of feedback from someone better than you. Third, ask one disarming question about any belief you hold. What would it take to prove me wrong, and have I ever honestly looked? If you cannot answer that, you may be standing on the peak without knowing it. So let us go back to where we began. The least skilled are often the most certain, because the knowledge to do well and the knowledge to judge yourself are the same knowledge. The fix is not to crush your confidence. It is to make it accurate. Stay a little suspicious of certainty, your own most of all. Treat the valley of doubt as a sign you are learning, not failing. The expert is not the person who has stopped doubting. It is the person whose doubts have finally become specific. You will never reach the very top of the mountain. But the moment you can see how tall it really is, you have already started to climb. If this made you look at the confident voices around you a little differently, there is much more where it came from. Subscribe, and we will keep turning these strange, hidden quirks of the mind into something you can actually use. Because the more clearly you can see your own blind spots, the harder you become to fool.